Hi, welcome back to Cheyenne, Wyoming Urban Gardener. This is Debbie, Garden Zone 5A, 5B, and we are so into the fall. Do you see what's on these squash plants right now? That would be downy mildew, because the plants are getting old at this point, and they're starting to acquire disease. Downy mildew is not a big deal. Don't worry about it if you get it. It doesn't affect, in my experience, any of the plants as far as production. They're still producing some squash on them. I'm not sure if they'll finish because it's so late in the season at this point. But I've noticed a few little squash, like right there, that have gotten pollinated and that are trying to go and do what they're supposed to do. There's one right there. And I've spotted one here and there throughout the garden. This one was most likely pollinated today. And maybe they'll get to do something because I don't see any freezing temperatures anytime soon in the forecast. We are supposed to get snow in the mountains, 9,000 feet above elevation, which would most likely be up in the area of Happy Jack and Laramie on the pass. So that's probably where there'll be snow. And that's supposed to be sometime later this week. But as far as here, I'm not seeing anything anytime soon. And we do have quite a few squash that are still remaining on the vines, just like that large pumpkin that you just saw. And there's actually two more out here on the ends of the vine. And this is the same variety of pumpkin. I'm not really sure what type. You can actually see a couple more right there. And they're still even trying to produce right there. That one's not pollinated as yet. And we still have quite a few flowers that are just now starting to bloom, like some of the marigolds, because they were in the more shaded area of the garden. And we still even have some sunflowers blooming. And we still have red curry squash coming up on the vines. And we still have acorn squash that is setting. There's two of them together, twins. And some of them are pretty large in here now. And the squirrels are starting to quiet down on doing a lot of chewing squash and things like that. You can see a red curry in there. And we've got a few yellow straight neck squash still coming on. There's a few on this plant here. And we do have beet tops and Swiss chard that is starting to bound back from all of the warmth that we had there for a short period of time. I do believe we have some pretty large parsnips in there at this point, and I know that we have some pretty large carrots because I've been pulling some. And we still have quite a few carrots to go. We still have an entire row of Parisian ox hearts that are now about palm sized. And I'm going to leave them to see how large they will actually end up getting. You can see some of our kilo cabbage over there. That's like a Napa variety of cabbage. And then we have some other cabbages that are still coming on, as well as some rutabagas that are still getting nice and big. We have one in there about the size of a pumpkin now. But you can see most of these sunflowers are now gone in the living fence, which really didn't matter because our cosmos is now about 6 feet tall. In fact, that one right there is probably about 7 feet tall. I've never had cosmos get that large. So it's pretty interesting. Most of them that have gotten that large have bent over. You can see this one here is just bent over. If I stretch that one up, it's about the same height as that one. It's about 7 feet tall. And they're blooming. There's not anything wrong with them. The stems are huge. And we still have broccoli coming on. This is the purple sprouting broccoli. I haven't seen much about it that's purple, so it's most likely going to be the heads, but it reminds me a lot of cauliflower because it's very, very late in producing. And it does have the look of cauliflower about it. It's a little bit different than broccoli. And I won't be surprised if snow is flying before we start getting heads on these guys, which really won't matter to it too much. We're letting some of our lettuce go to seed over here. We're going to collect the seeds on this lettuce. We had cut and cut and cut and cut. It was basically a cut and come again on the lettuce, and have eaten all summer long on the lettuce, as well as sold lettuce and gave away lettuce. So now that it's going to seed, we'll collect the seeds. So that's been a very productive lettuce. And there's that other row of carrots in there, right up against the lettuce. And we still have some squash in here that's coming to fruition. We've got a pumpkin back there and then a couple of spaghetti squash. We've already harvested most of them on there. We have not checked the sweet potatoes. We haven't looked at the sweet potatoes in a while, but the vines on the sweet potatoes have actually ran all across the ground everywhere. They've been trying to climb the house in the back. So I wonder if we've actually got any sweet potatoes in there. I would be surprised if we did, but eventually we'll check those and see what we have. I'm going to leave them to the very, very last minute. I really need to get in there and harvest some of the peas, because these peas are ready. They went to seed, and we're saving them for seed. And you can see all the pea vines are dead back there on the fence, and all the peas are just hanging in there waiting. But they're just fine to be in those pea pods. They'll be perfectly safe until we're ready to harvest them when I've had time. I have had less and less and less time available to me as we get more into the season, because so many other things start popping up. We still have lots of squash coming off of these vines. I've had squirrels attack them quite a bit, and yes, they do look rough. There's part of it dying back there. We've got downy mildew on them, but they are still producing squash. We still have celery in here. This was the third run of celery, and it is actually starting to produce stalks now, even though it's pretty little. It will still continue on until the snow flies, and we'll keep harvesting. And we've had some more peppers off of our pepper vines back there. Mostly small ones, but we have had some large ones. We just have not had the heat that we needed this season consistently to produce large peppers like we had last season. And our beans have not stopped. Our beans are being let go to seed now, and I'm going to have a lot of bean seeds at this point. I have beans in here hanging. It's so tempting to just come in and pick some, but we do need the seed because we used every seed that we had. And I'm going to have to keep these guys separated because we do have separate varieties of beans in here. They're still growing. Look at that. Still producing runners, still climbing everything if they can. Still blooming, still producing. Look at all these beautiful beans in here. Even though the vines are looking rough at this point, they have just produced themselves to death. We've picked 4 or 5 times off of these at this point. We've sold, we have canned, we have put in the freezer. We've gotten 2 or 3 bushels. It's more than 3 bushels, to be honest. I think we've picked probably almost 4 bushels at this point. We just keep coming back. And then whatever doesn't go to seed and we have beans still producing at the time of when we collect the seed, then that is more beans that we'll have to put in storage. So loads and loads and loads of beans in here. We're going to save the seeds off of our nasturtiums. We've had really good season with nasturtiums this season, even though I've only had a few because I only had a few seeds. To be honest, we've got several varieties of nasturtium. We have Icelandic nasturtiums, we have the tall nasturtiums, we have medium nasturtiums, we have dwarf nasturtiums. So we're going to save the seed on all of them. They are just now starting to put their little seed pods on. We had replanted basil and lettuce and radishes and spinach and things like that, and all of that is beginning to come up now. And it's only just been a couple of days that those have been planted. We have loads of eggplants that are hanging on all of the vines, and they are actually pretty large for us anyway in Wyoming. They don't usually get super huge, but we've got some pretty nice sized eggplants at this point, and they're still growing. We'll let them grow as long as the temperature doesn't get so low that it just basically stunts their growth. We'll keep letting them go. And we've been having more and more cherry tomatoes. The cherry tomatoes have actually perked up. So have the tomatillos and started blooming again. And they're producing more tomatillos and more tomatoes in there. You can see how rough they were at the bottom. But the new growth that is coming out on these, you can see all these blooms on here and new tomatoes, is just quite astounding that they just bounce back like that. And we're going to have basil finally to harvest. We had planted some basil at the base of these tomatoes, thinking that it was going to get really warm, and it didn't. We had some days of hot weather, but for the most part it was just really wet and really rainy for most of the summer, spring and summer. So we do have basil in here that we will be able to harvest, and it's looking quite nice now. And we have bought some mums. I don't usually save mum seed. I'm not very familiar with mums, but these were just really pretty, so I had purchased some mums. Some of them were on clearance, and they have just bloomed like crazy. They're so full of bloom. And I think I got these for like $3, some of them $1 on the really large container out here. And it has 3 different colors of mums in here. You can see I got it on clearance because it had these blooms that were already spent, but it already had a whole bunch of blooms popping up on it. And we're actually just going to go in and take all of these blooms that are spent out, and it will start to produce again. You can see these on here that have not bloomed as yet. We had also replanted cabbage in a lot of our containers. And the biggest issue that I'm having with containers and cabbage is when I water them, you can see right there, you can't really see the green. That is because the soil keeps going over top of the cabbage. So I have to be really careful when I'm watering them. I've lost basically those 2 to having the soil cover them again. But there's a couple of them in there that are pretty nice. Starting to put on their mature leaves now. And we got some more basil right here that we had planted, and that's looking quite nice. We've also got some Tuscan kale, or lacinato kale, that's doing pretty well. Starting to put on some new leaves. It had gotten beaten up by hail, but you can see there's some new leaves coming in down there. And we can actually just go ahead and take these leaves off now, and that look much nicer. And those will come back out. This was a broccoli here, and hopefully it'll come out and produce. See, we've got a couple of those Tuscan kale or lacinato kale over here. We now are starting to get some blooms on this was a rooted, I believe this one was a red pear tomato. And we're starting to trim them up because the bottoms were a little rough. So we're going to go ahead and take these stems off here in a minute, and they'll be nice and healthy up top. They're starting to bloom. They're starting to produce some tomatoes. And there were some speckled Romas in here. Those are just now starting to bloom. We've lost a couple of them, but for the most part, they're doing pretty well. This red pear tomato was the older red pear tomato, and it is actually starting to produce again. And we've been trimming it back up, and it is looking pretty healthy again at the top. You can see that nice healthy extension there, and it's blooming and producing some more tomatoes. So we'll have another flush of tomatoes hopefully. And actually, if it gets too cold, we can carry this one inside and just keep them going. And I was actually surprised that it produced a couple more tomatoes on this extension here, because this had already bloomed and we had already taken the tomatoes, and it had went ahead and produced again in the same spot, which usually never happens. Looks like this one got damaged, probably by a bird or something. So we'll go ahead and take that one off and just give that a toss. And we've got some lemon cucumbers in here that are producing pretty well. We've already harvested a few of those off those lemon cucumbers. Even though they look rough, they're still producing like crazy. These two tomatoes, this was the Cherokee Purple and the Jubilee. The Jubilee was the first to go. It finally produced all it was going to produce, and it died. So this could actually be taken out at this point. And the Cherokee Purple also has died back. So we'll just go ahead and get those either cut out of there or just remove them and just let the cucumbers take over. And we have harvested and harvested and harvested blooms off of our Strawberry Blonde Marigold. So we keep harvesting those for seed, and we've got quite a lot of them. And I think I will just go ahead and have a lot of friends and things that'll be able to take some of those seeds, and I may actually post some on the videos for people to enjoy. And there's the tomato popping up on this one, but overall it looks kind of rough. So it's just that it's getting cooler temperatures now at night. My grandson is in the background making a lot of noises, so I have to keep pausing the video to get him to hush. That is the Icelandic nasturtiums. We still have lots of herbs that are popping up. Our tarragon is starting to pop back out again. Our cilantro, we'd harvested that, and it is already coming back out. And we harvested some of the parsley. You can see it's looking a little rough, but it's starting to pop back out some stuff as well. And we've got some pretty nice peppers that are popping up on the plants back here. You can see one hanging there and a nice big one there. And they're blooming and starting to produce, so hopefully we'll get a few peppers off of these guys. We still have some tomatoes on these vines, but I'm about ready to take these tomatoes out because they are pretty much finished. Our Black Prince tomato is actually coming back out again too, and is starting to bloom. Take a look at that. We had basically a couple of them left out of the ones we've grown. Most of them died back completely. We took those out, and then we had some Amish paste tomatoes. Those have produced. We've already harvested, and they didn't get very big because we got those for free from the Botanic Gardens, and they were pretty stunted when we got them. Sounds like we're on the flight pattern today for the Air Force Base. So we only have a few tomatoes that are hanging around. These peppers here just basically did not do anything the rest of the summer, and that's just because it's not been warm enough. We've had one pepper pop up on those, but for the most part they didn't do much more than that. This one has produced like crazy. The one that we ended up with in error, that was basically not what it was labeled to be. It was supposed to have been jalapeno, and we're pretty sure that it is a hot Hungarian wax pepper. And we've had loads and loads of those, but not something that we really eat. We've had loads and loads and loads of ground cherries, and they're still producing. Everything over here is still looking pretty good, and we've gotten some blooms on our newer cucumber plants. They're starting to produce. These are the early Fortune cucumbers, and they stand cool temperatures going all the way down into the 30s. So they're still doing quite nice in comparison to a lot of the other cucumbers that we have. Got some blooms on our hibiscus over here. We've had a new flush of blooms on our red hibiscus as well. You can see we cleaned out our kiddie pool. This one had the squash in it. There was some white pumpkins in here, as well as some tomato plants. We left a couple of the tomato plants that still look pretty good and are still blooming and still producing. And then we've got a pepper plant over here that has several peppers on it, some nice big peppers, and another pepper plant that is still producing quite a bit. And this was another one of those hot Hungarian wax peppers that shouldn't have been, but is. And we have a ground cherry over here, which is actually the healthiest one and the biggest out of the bunch, and it's still producing. Our loofah sponge plant, again, it's Garden Zone 5A, 5B. They don't do very well here. It did produce a couple of them. We harvested those and we're letting them dry out. But overall, not really worth wasting time on when there's so many other things that you can grow. We've already replanted with lettuce in here. There's little gem lettuce in here, as well as a loose leaf blend, gourmet blend of lettuce. And we also planted some spinach here in the center section. So there's spinach all in here. There's a loose leaf blend all in here. And then in here is the little gem variety of lettuce. And that is a 9-inch head lettuce that produces within about 42 days. So we should have some lettuce heads out of that pretty soon overall, probably by November at least. And it is also a cooler temperature lettuce, so it should be able to handle if it snows a little bit. So we will see how that does. We have cleaned up most of our garden towers at this point. There's just some pansies left at the bottom that I'm still wanting to get seeds on. I've collected some seeds off of these guys, but not a whole lot, and they still have some seed pods on them. So we're collecting those. And then we have this giant marigold over here, I believe is a desert marigold, and it has these enormous blooms on it. And we're going to collect the seeds on those. And otherwise, we just have some volunteer pansies that have came up from seed that I did not get a chance to collect. I've collected most of them, but of course there's always loads and loads of pansy seeds that escape you. So they started coming up like crazy. So I'm just going to leave them because they usually will overwinter, and they'll come back out in the spring. So we'll see those again in the spring. We have a few strawberry plants in here that we have not transferred out yet, but we will be doing so very soon. So they'll have a chance to root before it starts getting really cold. We've got a nasturtium in here that we're trying to collect seeds on. And then we have collected most of the seed pods from our snapdragons. We still have strawberries coming out of all of these strawberry plants. In fact, I have put away so many strawberries, and I can't eat strawberries. I'm actually allergic, but the rest of the family eats them. So I have just seen so many strawberries. I'm like so done with strawberries this year. At this point, we've had 2 or 3 gallons of strawberries that we've collected throughout the spring and summer. We don't really eat that many, so quite a lot of strawberries. I've given away strawberry plants, sold strawberry plants. We've let them spread into a couple of different areas, a couple of different containers, and we've been selling those. And it's just been a lot of strawberry plants this season, more so than ever. Still lots of tomatillos hanging on our tomatillo vines and the other kiddie pool, and we still have cantaloupes in here that are still getting ready. They're just about done. They've gotten their webbing, as you can see, and we can see a little bit of separation going on with where they're connected. They're not very big. These are ambrosia, so they're starting to disconnect a little bit from the vine, but not anything serious as yet. This one actually got chomped by a squirrel, but it's still growing. We have a couple more over here. We've got a couple more over there. And we have a pretty large one there in the back. And another one in a container. So there's quite a few cantaloupes in here. And then we're still getting some tomatoes off of these tomato plants as well that are in this container. Even though I really want to go ahead and get it cleaned out and plant it with something else. It has so much production and it's still going on that I don't want to disturb it. And here again is a lot of the strawberry plants that we pulled from the garden tower previously. Got them started in some containers. These are Fort Laramie strawberries, and they're doing pretty well overall to have been moved. And we have been taking okra just about every day. Even though these plants are small, they're still producing, and they're producing very nice large okra every day. There's 3 or 4 on the plants pretty much every day. You can see a bloom happening. Just harvested that one and it's already coming back out again. So we've got okra every day. We're starting to get seeds on our dill And I've actually just been replanting those and let them come back out. We planted some oregano in here, which has just been a few days ago, and oregano takes a while to come up, so it hasn't started coming up yet. But we just planted these radishes the same time 3 or 4 days ago, and they're already up like crazy. And yes, we have a couple of cucumbers in there still coming on, and we have lettuce that we planted that is starting to come up. This is the Four Seasons lettuce. And then over here we have another variety. I think this is more Little Gem lettuce we planted in here. And then we have a few eggplants over here, but these plants did not ever get very big. So I don't think these are going to get super huge, but at least we have a few more to add to the amount that we have. And we have our second run celery over here. Remember, we have the third, we had the first, this is the third or the second run, and it is starting to stalk up now like crazy. And we have had loads and loads of cucumbers finally, and these vines are still producing. And we've started getting cantaloupes coming up on the cantaloupe vines in here, but it's too late. I don't think they're going to do anything. And we're starting to get some heads on our cabbages that we planted. This was the later run of cabbages, so they're starting to head up now, except for this one. And we're starting to get some squash on our squash vines back here. And again, we planted these probably the last week of August, so they've only been in the ground for a couple of weeks, few weeks at the most, and they're already starting to produce squash. Take a look at that. So we've got those coming on. Again, we're having helicopters fly over. It's probably the Air Force Base. We'll see if we can actually get a shot of them. There they go. So that's the Air Force Base. They're doing some probably tactical maneuvers or something. And we're starting to collect our pea seeds over here, letting them finish out, because we didn't have very many of those left and we wanted to try to get those. And I had a variety of yellow bush beans, and I didn't have very many of those seeds. So I think I'm going to let these go to seed. They're actually beautiful beans. I'm going to let them go to seed and save those, because then I'll get more seed than what I planted, and then we'll have even more next season. Now, an update on the sale of the house, because everybody knows we have our house up for sale, that we're trying to get a homestead up and going. Well, we've had a couple of offers coming on the house, and they've been a little strange. So we had to decline those, and so we're still going to be here until the house sells. Yes, we are still moving. Yes, we are still looking for a homestead, and that will be the way that it goes. Until it sells, we're not able to get moved out of here until that sells. And once that is done, then we'll start the process for looking for another place, since we had the one fall through in the spring. So I will keep you guys updated on what's going on with that when I know more. But right now we're just waiting for our house to get a really good solid offer, and then it gets it under contract. And then we will start looking for another place as soon as that is done. So anyway, that is what's going on with our garden. We've done a lot of planting. We'll hopefully get a little bit more of a harvest a little later in the season. And hopefully it just does not turn out to be a really snowy season, because that will kill that process. Anyway, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notices on new videos as they come out, and we will see you in the next one.